Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? We're at the very end. Oh my gosh. Woo. How's everyone feeling? Yeah. Oh, come on. We've solved all of San Diego's problems, right? We fixed it. I think we're done. Ready to go home, kick up our feet. Yeah, now we have to do the state of California. That'll be easy. We solved San Diego's problems. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Sanchez Villafana, and I'm the managing editor at Voice of San Diego. Thank you for joining us today at Politifest 2025 Solutions Showdown. I hope you guys have had a great time hearing what sort of issues and solutions we could adopt or maybe think about to solve some of our region's greatest problems. So, in case you're not familiar with us, Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit investigative news organization committed to holding public officials accountable and giving you, the public, the information you need to be advocates for good government. As a nonprofit, we depend on members, donors, and sponsors like you to make our work possible. So thank you for your support. You being here helps us do the work that we do. So really, thank you. I'd like to take a minute to recognize our sponsors who made Politifest possible this year. Special thanks to the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of San Diego for being our partner for the 8th year. They've hosted us. They're very, very great hosts, so thank you. Thank you also to the Sequan Band of the Kumeyaay Nation, Mark Nelson and Nelson Stakeholder Consulting, the San Diego Foundation, Hitsky Development, Intessa, the Prebis Foundation, First Five San Diego, and AARP. We'd also like to recognize KPBS and iNewsSource, our partners in public matters. We're partnering to share content, conversations, and events like Politifest to ensure all San Diegans understand their opportunity to participate in the democratic process, and that it means more than voting in an election. I hope you all had a chance to stop by our community tables outside. They're really great, and if you happen to fill out your passport, you'll get Voice of San Diego swag, so that's exciting. If you're unable to attend any of the sessions, maybe you were interested in two and you couldn't make the other one, don't worry. We'll have those on our website where you can watch them after the event. I've assigned all of our reporters stories about what the solutions were. So you can feel free to look at our website after our event. We also are using the special app that I'm sure most of you are already familiar with since you're towards the end of the day. Or you can submit your questions. So make sure you scan it, make sure you're in the right one, look up on the top, make sure you're in the right session, and you can submit your questions there, and I will hand them to Joey when we're ready. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our moderator, Joey Safchik. She's a political reporter at NBC San Diego.
Hello. Is this on? It's on. Okay. I'm so grateful that you're here. I know it's the end of the day. You have so much information in your brains now, but I'm really grateful that you're here to talk about Prop 50 with us. All of the other solution showdowns that you've been voting on today have been so informative, but those votes are really in the abstract. They're symbolic. This is something you're actually going to be voting on in real life in like 48 hours. So when you get home from work Monday, your ballot could very well be in your mailbox, and then you have about a month until Election Day on November 4th to vote on Prop 50. So this is a really worthwhile way to spend your time. Quickly, before we get into this debate, I would like to introduce you to our panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but very quickly, we have Jon Slavet, who is the State of Gold podcast host. He's going to be opposing Prop 50. And then we have Assemblymember Chris Ward, who represents San Diego. He's going to be in favor of Prop 50. Very quickly, can you just give us your elevator pitches?
I'm Jon Slavet. It's important you can hear me. I've lived in California for 30 years. This is my not just adopted but real home. I live in Northern California and came down for this event. This is how important this subject is to me. So I'm very much looking forward to engaging in this dialogue with Chris. We need civil dialogue now more than ever in the U.S. with opposing viewpoints. I'm the father of 5 children growing up in California. My wife, Dee, is right there. Our youngest is 9 months old. Our oldest is 20. So we really care about the future of California, the future of democracy. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur in tech, media, and real estate, and I left that a year ago to start a media company to put forward good ideas in politics. And my current podcast is called State of Gold, and the mission of the podcast is to source and promote the best ideas to turn California around, because California is in a very tough place for a lot of our citizens. So that's me, Chris.
Well, thanks, John. Great to be back at Politifest. Now 2 years, I had a chance to have another debate last year with Senator Jones. Chris Ward, State Assembly member for the 78th Assembly District, which is a lot of our central San Diego communities, loosely all defined, Balboa Park, up to Miramar, out to San Diego State College area, and some of the surrounding neighborhoods around that. So think about the central part of San Diego, 500,000 constituents. Now just finishing up my 5th year in this role in the legislature. We go back in January for the second half of this 2-year session. So it's really nice right now. I'm a couple weeks off of the end of session to be to breathe, to be able to come home. Out at Mira Mesa Street Fair this morning, out and about at our town councils, had my own town hall last Saturday, my first one of this fall, to really take a lot of that input and make sure we're designing a work plan that meets the moment right now, because I think John and I would agree that there's a lot of need, there's a lot of demand, a lot of crisis that California is facing right now, and it's about putting forward those good solutions. And I get to be the vessel to be able to help make some of that policy change and budget decisions in Sacramento for San Diego's behalf. Also, like John, a father, but never made it to 5, so happy to have 2 kids that are a 1st grader and a 6th grader right here in our San Diego public schools. Great to see them every night now that I get to be home full time. Assistant coach of a soccer league on Saturdays, and that kind of rounds out my profile at the moment.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, that's not working. Maybe this will do. You did that. Prop 50. Let's talk about what Prop 50 is. You've all probably been inundated with mailers and advertisements and YouTube videos and commercials by now. If you haven't, wow, good for you. But let's just break it down very quickly. I'm going to give an objective overview, and then obviously you will both have the opportunity to make your case. Nope, that didn't work. It's this one. There we go. Like I said, Election Day is November 4th, but your ballot will be in your mailbox on Monday or sometime this week. And what you're being asked to do is to approve or reject new congressional district maps. These maps were drawn by Democrats in the state legislature, and they give Democrats an edge in the 2026 midterm elections, which are coming up faster, I think, than any of us could possibly imagine. They are designed to flip 5 seats here in California, leaving only 4 seats to GOP control in the state if everything goes according to Democrats' plans. Does that work? Okay. So the ballot measure itself says that this special election is a direct response to efforts to redistrict in Texas to favor Republicans in the Lone Star State, which they did at the explicit behest of the president over the summer. Democrats would argue that Trump was worried about Congress slipping from his grasp in 2026. But here in California, these maps on your ballot in November were drawn up in Sacramento. They were approved by state legislators, and not the independent redistricting commission that you all as voters approved a decade and a half ago. But the measure does state that that power would return to the independent commission come the census in 2030. So, too long didn't read, which for my dad, TLDR, now you know. Yes on 50 means you would approve the new maps, you give Democrats an edge in 2026. No on 50 means we keep the maps as they are currently drawn, and the power, the responsibility to draw maps remains consistently with the independent commission. Okay, so now we have a basis, knowledge. I'm sure many of you already know where you lean on this, but I think it's really important, like John alluded to, that we hear each other out and we have some civil discourse, right? Ready to jump in?
Indeed.
Okay, let's do it. Okay. I'm going to start with questions that I'd like for both of you to answer, and then we'll jump in and get your individual perspectives on a bit as well. I forgot I was going to ask you both for your favorite book as part of your introductions. Maybe we can get to that at the end. Okay. So first of all, in your own words, perhaps a little bit less unbiased or impartial than mine, what are you asking people to vote on? Assemblymember Ward, why don't you
Sure,
start?
we'll start with the yes side. We are asking people to vote yes on 50 because this is an existential matter for our interests here in California specifically. And I'm going to argue, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, this is why we put the question on the ballot. We are the only state in the country that's actually asking voters if they want to make this change because, of course, the legislature doesn't have that power so directly, like Texas, but not just them. Kansas, Missouri, other states are looking at this too right now to shift the balance of power in Washington, D.C. So why is this so important? It's not just about do we want to have more Democrats and do we want to have be able to take a vote and be able to redraw maps and create some kind of a political advantage. There is a practical outcome that matters to Californians, and that's something I've been living with, we've been living with all year long, and that's the threat of Trump policies on our communities, specifically on California communities. The only check and balance in that power is possibly getting a Congress that's willing to stand up. And you're right. Normally, in mid-year elections, you see the party that's not in power in the White House start to gain seats right now, and they only have a 3-seat majority as it is. We are seeing evidence of that in state legislative races across the country where Democrats are overperforming Trump's performance in that same district by 18 points on average. So we know that the wins are there for change in Washington, and we desperately need that if we're going to have some sense of normalcy for a lot of the decisions, a lot of the impacts on our community. But they're moving the goalposts through these other states without voters' consent. And so Proposition 50 is titled the Election Rigging Response Act. We have the power as California voters to be able to mitigate some of the impacts that we're seeing from some of these other states, to be able to go toe-to-toe and be able to actually say that we can have a shot at drawing maps that counterbalance what we are seeing in other states. That brings fairness to the control of Congress. It's still up to the voters in the midterm elections, and that'll be a whole separate debate and an election cycle, but at least you are leveling the playing field to have a fair outcome for power in Washington that affects our communities.
John, go for it.
You can clap.
Yeah, we can keep the energy up. You can. I don't mind
let's
now.
keep the
This is a
energy
very
up.
casual, informal
1, 2,
debate. We're
3.
not doing opening statements or anything of the like, so we don't mind a little bit of audience participation, but keep it kind.
Okay, well,
That's
thanks
my
for
ground
that. Thanks
rule.
for
That's
that,
my
Chris.
one rule.
Thank you for that, Chris. The first thing I would say is I share your righteous indignation about this thing called gerrymandering. Because I think you're indignant that Texas has put it in motion, and there are other states that are now looking at gerrymandering. So we should be against gerrymandering wherever it happens in the country. Thank you. I like the back of this audience. Let's start with why that's so important. When Texas instigated their gerrymander, at the request of President Trump, to eliminate 5 Democratic seats, which it surely will in the midterm because of the way they've drawn the maps, our government leader's response in California was to do the same thing to our own citizens in California. So the maps that Chris and his colleagues have drawn and approved will surely eliminate 5 Republicans here and disenfranchise. Well, hear me out. And disenfranchise several million people in California. And what has resulted from those first 2 actions in Texas and in California? Now we have actions and whisper campaigns going on in many states across the country, either dominated by Democrats or Republicans, to do the same thing to their minority parties, to bludgeon them out of existence through politicians going into the back room, proverbially, that smoke-filled room of old, and drawing maps themselves for purely partisan interest. And so what I would say to Chris and to all of you is that while if you're a partisan Democrat in California and you look short-term, you say, this is a win for California. We're eliminating the Republicans. But we're trading our long-term democratic soul as we the people. It sets a terrible precedent for the country because as goes California, so goes the country. We have influence. What we do matters in the country. And what's being put in motion has no end. where does this end for democracy? Where does it end for America? It goes into a very dark place. So in the course of this conversation, I'd like to hear Chris explain where he thinks this goes for the country. I think it goes nowhere good. So I'll start with that.
I want to follow up on that. Does the onus to answer that question solely fall on California, though? I think lots of people would argue California didn't start this.
Yeah, so, yeah. So you could argue that there's a chicken and egg, perhaps. Yes, Texas went first. Their legislature drew the maps for purely partisan gain for Republicans to eliminate Democratic seats. They don't have an independent citizens commission like we do. So in 2010, 61.3% of our fellow citizens, 61.3% voted to create an independent citizens commission to draw the maps for our House members in California that we send to Washington. That was enshrined in Article 21 of the California State Constitution. And we are now looking at a ballot where a simple majority of just over 50% can suspend our California State Constitution. What I'm arguing, Joey, is not whether it's better or worse that Texas went first and California went second. I'm arguing this is going to create a chain reaction across the country that hurts us all. And we can get into the question of whether Prop 50 is really going to preserve democracy in the country. I argue that it will not. I argue it's going to degrade democracy in the country.
Assemblymember Ward, do you want to respond?
No, a lot to respond to. So let me start by acknowledging that what happened in Texas is not just actually shifting and trying to remove 5 Democratic seats, but actually removing 5 black and brown members of Congress as well from the power that they have, that they're trying to be able to elevate their voice in Washington. And we have a unique response opportunity and a unique option here in California with the consent of our voters, not just because actually we're required to do so to be able to go back to the Constitution. They put it in, only the voters can change it in the first place. But also that validates, I think, that there is popular support for this proposal here. Nobody got to have that say, or nobody got to actually ask the voters in Texas or Kansas or in Missouri that have already begun to take action, other states to follow. There are a few other states, I would think blue states, that have the option of possibly looking at that. Some of those through the legislature, others through possible voter consent. But the overwhelming option, if you really took this to the full scale nationwide, yes, Republicans could net a lot more seats. Nobody can make up a difference like 5 seats like the state of California. And so we do have both an interest here for California's purposes, but also our share of responsibility to national outcomes because every American would be affected. This does end. This does end after 2030 because these maps are temporarily in effect until 2030, at which point, baked into this Proposition 50, the power goes right back to the Independent Redistricting Commission, several commissioners of whom, by the way, have actually endorsed Proposition 50. And we would hope that this entire experiment that we didn't start and we don't like responding to might actually have sat well with most Americans, that will shift more states to be able to think about independent redistricting commissions. But that's not the world we live in today, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like by the time that we get to 2030. I would say that one of the biggest things that I've heard as a representative all year long is, what are you doing to try to go toe-to-toe with the Trump administration to the best and every extent that you can? Right? We're suing, and we're often winning on those to try to protect your taxpayer dollars. That doesn't mean that he's actually going to release the funds or listen to the courts. But what else can we do? Well, how are we thinking outside the box? Because there are unprecedented actions out of Washington, D.C. that we have never seen before in the history of our country right now. And we have got to be thinking creatively and appropriately to go toe-to-toe to those. Otherwise, if we sit on our hands and say, well, this is a principle and we have our commission, and we are missing that moment to possibly leverage our support to be able to level that playing field. And that's what Proposition 50 is about.
When you say you're not sure what the world is going to look like in 2030, why should voters trust that what's codified in this ballot measure is going to hold true, that legislators won't walk back that promise to return this power to the independent commission?
Because it's literally baked in the measure itself right now, and the only thing you could do to ever change that again is to have yet another question put to the voters sometime after 2030. That's not something that I would want to do, because again, this is the Election Rigging Response Act. We are responding to the times and the actions that we are seeing, which puts California communities at particular disadvantage. We have to step up for our interests and for the interests of other states as well that don't have this option that California has to be able to help level that playing field.
Do you have faith that that power is going to be returned to the commission?
You're asking me, Joey? Mm-hmm. Well, I would repeat what Governor Schwarzenegger has said in the recent past. He's gone on record saying that he has grave doubts that we'll return to the independent commission. There's an old saying that there's nothing that lasts longer than a temporary government program. And I think it's true throughout history. I'm with Governor Schwarzenegger. You know, in 2010, it was the third try that created this independent commission. It took a lot of effort and a lot of time. 2008, citizens voted by a little over 50% to create the commission to draw maps for our state senators and assembly members. And in 2010, with a lot of effort and a 61% positive vote, we created this independent commission. It was a huge lift. We should be proud of that, and we should preserve it in California. What I'd say to Chris is he essentially is saying that the means justify the ends. He's saying that the end is to make a statement, the end is to fight back, and the means we should use is to pass a ballot that strips millions of our fellow Californians of their franchise. I argue that that's wrong. I think it's short-term gain for the Democratic Party in California, and it trades our long-term democratic soul. We have to think as a we. Think about when the shoe's on the other foot. You know, the pendulum of politics swings. There's a lot of evidence in California that we're getting more moderate. We're electing more moderate officials. At some point in the not too distant future, Republicans will have the gavel in Sacramento. And what will they do with the power and the precedent that's been established by Prop 50? It's completely wrong-headed. I would also say this. California is in a very tough situation within the borders of our state. Our working poor, working class, and middle class people cannot afford to exist here. They cannot afford to exist here. California ranks near the bottom in almost every metric that matters. We have the highest poverty many years running. We have the highest unemployment. We have the highest energy cost, the highest housing cost, which the session earlier today talked about, the least upward mobility for our citizens. And so meanwhile, what our leaders in this state are doing is they're saying, look over here. We're going to do this Prop 50 at the cost of almost $300 million of our money to distract from the real problems of California. We have really pressing problems that our leaders should focus on. And I think that's what actually matters right now. That's the real emergency.
Governor Newsom, and this was largely his brainchild, has said, quote, we could lose the republic. Are the stakes that high in your opinion, Assemblymember?
I absolutely do agree, because we know and we've experienced, we've all been watching this movie together this whole year, that there is no check and balance with the congressional majority right now. And if you are changing the way that that majority is formed and artificially predetermining what the majority is going to look like for the next 2 years after that, we know, if past this prologue, that we are not going to be able to have any changes that we deserve as a country right now to be able to have that check and balance through the powers of Congress. The ability to hold officials accountable, to be able to call those hearings, to be able to pass a budget. You know, the stranglehold that the Trump administration has on congressional Republicans, who I got to believe, just if a few of them would have a little backbone to stand up to that, would be able to at least have some sense of balance in DC, but they don't have that backbone, and so we're not getting that experience right now. And if everything was on the natural right now, if we did not have this redistricting ploy being worked on nationally, I still think that, you know, the country would respond as we have historically and we're seeing in recent trends, and we'd be able to at least have some comfort that we'd be able to take a half step towards normalcy post the 2026 midterm elections. You know, I think my
It did.
Just went out to you.
Got it.
Sure, thanks. You know, just a couple things to respond to. I mean, a litany of issues that, we are simultaneously working on right now, issues that I was happy to put on the governor's desk to be able to work on cost of living and affordability, civil rights, and all the other things that are within the state's power control. But none of that, all of that pales in comparison, and I'll address as well, the cost of this election pales in comparison to the billions, if not tens of billions of dollars that are not coming into California right now because of this authoritarian and just, unitary action that we're seeing out of Washington. It started, of course, with the withholding of fire relief funds for our communities. It started with opening the floodgates and wasting water in the Central Valley, the threats to our schools, the threats to healthcare systems, the threats to, for dollars that are conditioned against things that Californians don't want to see for themselves, for their states' rights. And so when you add all of that up recently, of course, the threats to our higher education facilities right now, in the billions of dollars that they are trying to withhold, which the courts have already looked at and said, that was a wrong decision, you must pay that money. We're hoping that money comes to us right now if they listen to the courts. So the $280 million or so that this will cost us right now pales in comparison to what is on the line for California over the next 3.5 years. It is a good return on investment if we take this shot.
A few things. The first is, none of the things you've mentioned are actions in the House of Representatives. All the things you've mentioned are executive actions. I just want to make that clear. All of the actions that Chris has mentioned, the Trump administration has been targeting California for, withholding of certain funds, those are all executive actions. None of those have been put forward by the House of Representatives. Let's just make that clear functionally. That Prop 50, whether it passes or not, will have nothing to do with the actions that Chris mentioned. I just want to.
I do want to keep us on track and make sure we keep talking Prop 50 because we could get lost in a
I'm going to
rebuttal
come right
spiral.
back, but that's an important point to make because it's not true, and Chris may want to respond, but I just want to put that out first and foremost, and put that on the table. I want to give a quick revisit of some history that affects the context for the midterms. So, hope I don't bore you. How's everyone's energy? It's pretty quiet, it's pretty mellow in here. Since 1946, in the United States, we'd have 20 midterms. Midterms happens every 4 years, right? So, over 80 years, 20 midterms. In those 20 midterms, the president's party, the president in power, has lost how many seats on average in the House? Anyone want to guess? Say it again, louder. I heard a 40. 25. Anyone else? 36. You were all pretty close. 28. Okay? The only 3 times that trend has been bucked was in 1962, JFK, 1998, Clinton, and 2002, George W. And their approval ratings in those 3 midterms were in the 60s to 70s. All of them were doing very well with their approval for different reasons. In every other midterm, the president's party lost between 8 to 60 seats. In 2018, President Trump's last midterm, how many seats did the Republicans lose? 40. What was his approval rating at the time? 45%. What is Trump's approval rating now in all the poll of polls as of this week? About 40 poll of polls. A little higher, a little lower. If you look at all the historical data, okay, from 1946, the last 80 years, it is almost a mathematical certainty that the president's party is going to lose a huge number of seats. So to say that Prop 50 is going to save democracy, to say that Prop 50 is going to make a dent in the midterms, it just does not comport with the facts. And I would go back to my initial argument that this is a tit for tat. What Texas did, and what Texas did, by the way, is now being adjudicated. Does everyone know there's a court case in the Western District of Texas, in El Paso? There are 3 judges, I believe 1 circuit judge, 2 district judge have been impaneled because plaintiffs, including the NAACP, have brought suit that the maps driven by the Republican legislature are illegal, and violate the Voting Rights Act. That's being adjudicated now, right now. And those maps may be overturned. So my point is, number one, the House of Representatives has nothing to do with the executive actions towards California right now. Number two, if you look at history, the Republicans are on track to lose a huge number of seats, probably at least 30. And number three, and Chris, I'd like your response to this, those maps in Texas, which I disagree with, they're gerrymandered. They're partisan and they're gerrymandered. If those are overturned and reversed, and Prop 50 passes, should we have another ballot to overturn our action in California? It's a response to Texas. Texas is being adjudicated right now.
Well, I'd say we know what we know in a moment in time right now, and even if a local trial court level judge or a panel of judges does overturn those maps, they are surely going to be appealed, and I'm sure this would all end up into the U.S. Supreme Court. I actually would give you this. I actually would like to see something make it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. I would be nervous, of course, because they've already stricken out a lot of the power of the Voting Rights Act, so some of the actions that they're even suing on may not apply to that. But if something got to the U.S. Supreme Court where they were denying or found any reason to find out of the mid-decade redistricting, that could actually undo everything nationwide, and we're right back to where we start with. That would be a great outcome, actually. I just don't have faith that all of those steps would necessarily fall into place, and so we know what we know today, and what today we have to do is respond to what's right in front of us.
I do want to ask, originally, voters were led to believe that the ballot measure would say this would only go into effect if Texas proceeded with its redistricting. That was taken out of the ballot measure.
Because
explain
at the
why.
time that I voted on this, yes, when it was drafted, it was conditional, but then that very same week, Texas took the action they did. They passed it, it's signed, so it was no longer conditional. It was in response to what Texas did. We had a deadline to be able to get everything to the Secretary of State, and that's exactly what you see on the ballot.
So at the time, it was a moot point, is what you're saying.
It's a moot point now.
How many people have received their ballot voter guide? It's, okay, you've got it. It's this teeny little paragraph. And one of the phrases says, we affirm independent commissions nationally. While we suspend our own independent commission for 3 election cycles to respond to the same bad behavior in another state that is now spawning more bad behavior in more states, some dominated by Democrats, some Republicans, to what end?
I do have a question.
To what end?
I do have a question about that. Do you have any concerns about the message that it sends to press pause on that independent commission that you and so many Democrats have lauded over the years?
No, because both of the things are true at the same time. We have a question that will have an impact that will drive power and decision-making over the next 2 years right now on a playing field that has been intentionally tilted. And California voters have the opportunity for the next few elections to be able to meet these other maps right now and help to right that playing field right now. You had asked earlier about the existential nature of this question right now, but this is only just one of the things that is coming at us right now, this sort of piece by piece redistricting. We already know that Trump and White House officials are interested in reapportionment. They are openly talking about this right now, about trying to actually go back to the same census data from 2021, remove some of those who were counted, try to say California doesn't have 52 seats anymore. They have 48 seats. They should redraw, and they're trying to actually do a mid-decade reapportionment, which has never been done in the history of the country. And then furthermore, already an executive order has been out there that has been casting doubt about whether or not they are going to accept any results from vote-in mailing, right? So this is early, but we have a lot more arguments ahead of us right now to make sure that fair election outcomes are actually obtained. We are walking into a very difficult year when we get past this midterm or this special election, where we are going to be participating in the right to make sure that the outcomes of our election are fairly respected at every step in the way.
Let me just, this is a bit rhetorical, but give me your take. I want to ask the audience a question. How many people believe that Joe Biden was elected in a free and fair election? Okay. How many believe that Trump was elected most recently in a free and fair election? Okay. We all agree that with all of its challenges and downsides and holes, our election system, which is run by each state, is generally free and fair. And thank God. And thank God for poll workers and election officials who have very difficult lives these days. We know that. We know that. But thank God we have free and fair elections in this country. So we have lots of challenges in this democracy, no question. But the integrity of our state-by-state election system is very strong. So I think we should value that and understand that and focus back on the two wrongs don't make a right nature of Prop 50. And where does this lead us? Where does this lead us when power changes hands in California? Where does it lead the rest of the country? Especially against the backdrop of the data that I put out, that I shared, that the president's party is going to lose, likely to lose, tens of seats in the midterms next November 2026. What are we actually doing here? Where is this actually leading we the people, this country?
What would the consequences of not playing this eye for an eye game be for Californians?
The consequences are, we are aware that a outcome has been skewed in the power of Congress. And yes, the power of Congress does have the opportunity to appropriate funds, to hold some of these departmental decisions accountable, to participate and put up weight against some of the Trump administration's actions right now. So it's important that if that's the will of the voters nationally, that we have that majority afforded to us. But the consequence, I think, of looking at this and saying, no, I'm a no on 50, we shouldn't take this opportunity right now, is that we are just willing to let other states predetermine what that outcome is going to be, and that's going to affect decisions that could come back to harm California communities.
I want to talk a little bit about the campaigns themselves. Obviously, a lot of money has poured into both sides thus far. I saw a spokesperson for the opposition say that the Yes campaign is really reaching its base, the Democrats. This has obviously become distinctly partisan. I think we've heard shades of that in this conversation, while the opposition campaign is making a concerted effort to reach independents. And I want to know how that lands with each of you and if you feel that's accurate.
I would say it probably is generally accurate. I mean, we're trying to reach anybody, one, that's willing to vote, please vote. Two, because special elections don't always turn out like the highest outcomes. But two, we know where this started. This started through a very explosive conversation, national conversation in July. And that was brought before the legislature, of course, because we had a narrow window to decide if we were going to put an action to the voters or not. But we know this started by Trump asking the Texas legislature to bend the knee and actually do something unprecedented on his interests and his behalf. Now, thank God, if I remember back to the 2020 election when he did the same for Georgia officials, they were unwilling to fine him 11,400 votes. And they said, no, we're going to have a free and fair election outcome, go away. But that wasn't the case in Texas. They basically said, is July soon enough for you? And so the question, again, is in front of us right now. It's gross. It is unfair. Nobody wants to be in this position, and I wish we didn't have to. But if what I'm hearing from a lot of our constituents, we are in an unprecedented time, when are we going to go toe-to-toe with this overreach of action right now and need to overreach and punch above our weight ourselves? And that's the question before the voters right now. If the campaigns are narrowing who they are choosing to target and talk to, it's a turnout question. Certainly, I would know that we would want to turn out more Democrats on this question, because the origins of this question originated with Trump. This is a yes on Trump or a no on Trump's interests.
You want me to respond to that, Joey, I assume?
I would love you to.
Okay. So today in California, we have 52 House seats, largest delegation in the country, largest state, 39 million people. Who knows how many Republicans and how many Democrats? Chris, how many Republicans in the delegation?
There are 9.
There are 9. Okay, that's right.
I gave you guys that answer at the beginning.
There are 9. There are 9. And so when this redistricting happens, the way the maps are driven. And who's seen the maps? Anyone actually gone on and looked at the simulations of the maps? Yeah. So the maps are drawn in some fairly outrageous ways where, we're now connecting Modoc County, which is on the border of Oregon, and it has got this long skinny piece that comes down to Mill Valley and Marin County, right? And we've got another district shaped like an elephant. And of course, if you look at the charter of the Independent Citizens Commission, the principles of drawing districts are that they're compact and they represent communities of interest. And what I would put to you is that in a democracy, a party that wants more seats should compete for the seats. And I believe that in Texas, that if Republicans want more seats, and we'll see what happens with that case, it could be that the NAACP prevails and they throw out the districts and they have to be rewritten. But let's see what happens in that case. And if Prop 50 passes, it may also be adjudicated, and we'll have to see what happens in that case. But I believe that politicians should put forward better arguments, more moderate policies that actually appeal across the aisle and win seats based on merits. And instead of going into a back room, like happened in Texas, like just happened in California, and is now beginning to happen in states across the country, again, some Dem, some Republican, where the will of the people is subjugated to the will of politicians who choose their voters. What happens when politicians choose their voters? There's no competition of ideas. If you can fog a mirror, you can get elected. There's no competition in the district. Voter trust and voter engagement goes down, and it creates more and more and more partisanship. And what I'm saying is that we are better than this in California. I'm saying we're better than this. We should honor our independent commission and uphold democratic values and show the country what a functioning constitutional democracy actually looks like. Because, Chris, I'd like to ask you, how does this play out across the country? We've got a tit for tat. Texas and California cancel each other out, or they don't. And hypothetically, other states go at this. Where does this lead for our democracy? And how does this actually guarantee a better outcome for California, given the fact that the president's party is likely to lose 30 seats or more in 2026?
So, quick answer that I'll say again for another time is that this helps to be able to level a field about how the majority in Congress is decided, and if there are actions that are predetermining certain outcomes in some states, we can counterbalance that, and that is that. So I like where we were going, though, because this is not, sort of getting off of like, do we redistrict or not redistrict, and what is the origins of that? But what about these maps? Because that's actually exactly what was plaguing me as I was thinking about whether or not to put forward these maps to the voters right now, because I like our Independent Redistricting Commission's criteria. I want to make sure that the Voting Rights Act is respected, that communities of interest and communities of concern are connected, and that all the other things that we go into, that the commission goes into, we as Californians go into, and also do locally here in San Diego with those maps, that all of those are respected. And I was really encouraged when we got the feedback from consultants that were helping us understand different permutations of these maps, that these values were upheld. And so many of these alignments that we see in the maps before voters today were the very same different alignments that the commission was weighing when it had all of the data and it was doing its public map drawing back in 2021. It said, I've got two different options. A district can go this way or it can go that way. And they chose Route A, and we are choosing Route B. And making sure that issues of congruity, that we are actually having maps before voters right now that have fewer divisions of cities and counties than the adopted maps that are in place today, that the Voting Rights Act is respected, and furthermore, we actually, if these maps are approved by the voters, would increase the number of Latino empowerment districts by 1. We are replacing, or we would propose to replace on these maps, a district that was actually in effect from the 2010 redistricting commission's work in southeastern Los Angeles. That disappeared in 2020. That was fine. That was that commission's purview. But the maps decided to put that back in there. And what that causes is a cascade effect through Orange County and right down to San Diego, which is the origins of why you see the San Diego maps potentially very different than what they are today. Because of course, everything compresses, you have to have equal population right now. So this idea about disenfranchisement doesn't sit terribly solid with me because one, we see disenfranchisement even more exacerbated in some of these other gerrymandered maps, but two, every one of those districts is going to be able to elect its representative by a majority outcome, and that would be the will of those districts.
What would you say
Joey, sorry,
I want to follow up on that. What would you say to the hundreds of thousands of Republicans here in San Diego County who could lose a Republican speaking for this county in Congress?
I want to be flip. I would say that you will have a better representative than you do right now.
Okay. I want to, Chris.
John.
You just flip-flopped and flopped again on both sides of this issue. I heard you say previously that it's gross that we have to put aside the Independent Citizens Commission. Those are your words, I believe. And I believe the reason you said that is because the gerrymander that has happened, that we're voting on for 11-4, is gross. You said it was in service of a higher purpose, which we've been debating for almost an hour. You said they were gross, and you wished we could keep the commission, and now you're arguing on the other side, actually these maps are better. Oh, hold on, I'd like to finish real quick, sorry. Both can't be true. They're not true. Listen, gerrymandering on racial lines is illegal, immoral, and against the Voting Rights Act. Gerrymandering on partisan lines is legal, and the Supreme Court affirmed that this decade in a case. This is why California can do it right now, and this is why Texas can do it. When the party in power decides to gerrymander and draw maps to eliminate their competition, which is what's happening in Texas, in California, and potentially all across the country, it's actually legal. Whether it should be or not, take it up with the Supreme Court. They decided it in 2020, okay? So Chris, you've just been on both sides of these issues. If the maps are gross and you want the independent commission in place, why are you arguing now that the maps are kind of better? I find that argument offensive to principle.
Yeah, you misconnected two things there. The action that we have to take is offensive and gross because we need to have this response, but I argued earlier, and I'm arguing that we do have to have that. The maps, by these metrics, are better if you care about connecting those communities of interest and if you care about the voting power and be able to have a representative from a community of color, which, by the way, the Supreme Court didn't say that you can't consider that. They said that you don't have to adhere to that. They struck down those parts of the Voting Rights Act. We in California can go above what they believe the Voting Rights Act says and is still in effect. And we can say, no, we're going to go back to the principles as we've always known them, and we do want to make sure that minority empowered districts are at the forefront of some of our decision making.
And I want to take a more bird's eye view because we're getting really granular now, and I want to make sure everyone's getting what they need to know what they're voting on and how it impacts them. So I do want to ask, this is being postured as a referendum on the Trump administration, on healthcare policies, on immigration policies that are largely unpopular here in California. How does the opposition push back against that?
Well, I think that you have to look at what Prop 50 is really about. What is motivating it, and whose interest does it serve? And does that align with the people of California or not? It so happens that this has become a huge fundraiser and a huge distraction for our governor.
Do you think this is a proxy battle?
Listen, we know that our governor has been pining to run for president for a long, long time. And this issue has become a fantastic fundraising vehicle to position himself for 2028, number one. Number two, it's, I think, beyond coincidental that Mr. Rivas, our Assembly Speaker, happens to live in one of the new districts that's been created. I think it's beyond coincidental that Mike McGuire, our leader in the Senate, happens to live in one of the districts that's been created. I think there are interests being served by this proposition that have nothing to do with President Trump. And I think that the $300 million of our taxpayer money that is being spent, almost $300 million, to run this very fast cycle of this proposition to ram it down the throats of Californians is incredibly misguided. And also for all of the reasons that I've expressed previously. I think it's a naked power grab in California, just like it's a naked power grab by the majority in Texas. And just like we put in motion across the country in other states where majority parties are going to try to grab power from their minorities in their states. I would say in terms of representing the voice of people in California, we have 43 Democratic elected members of the House who speak, I think, very clearly and very effectively for many of their districts in California. And we have 9 Republicans who speak for other districts, many of them rural populations. Rural populations historically underrepresented in Sacramento and in Washington. And I would put it to Chris and all of you that to say that Prop 50 is defending democracy when it is disenfranchising millions of people in California is wrong. And I'd say again that I think what politicians and parties should do is put forward better candidates with better policies and better arguments to win over voters in any state, whether it's Texas, California, or anywhere else.
Assemblymember Ward, I do want to press you on a question I asked earlier. I think your response was well received in this room, but I do want to ask in earnest what you would say to the voters who are currently represented by a Republican who would not have someone aligned with their political views speaking for them anymore here in San Diego County.
I served with a congressman named Adam Gray, who represents the Central Valley and represents his constituents very well. I know Josh Harder has represented rural constituents in the Central Valley very well. Again, I would argue to many of those that their current Republican incumbents are decimating their Medicare. They are harming farming communities right now, and they could still hold on to a lot of their partisanship and their interests, and they may not ever let that go. But I think that many of those communities are left even further behind because, I'm speaking right now, because of the ability for the representative to speak up on their behalf in a better way. Now, I did want to correct the record. The Assembly Speaker's congressional district was marginally, if hardly at all, changed in the new maps right now. There were a number of changes to the maps right now, lack of changes to the maps that are before the voters right now that are still a part of the adopted maps by the commission right now, largely the Central Coast, the Bay Area, and Western Los Angeles right now were largely untouched. So there were, again, because you had to drop in this new district in Southeast LA, it was a cascade effect. There were other ways to realign communities right now across Northern California that were also debated. And there were also some alternative drafts by the very same commission in 2021. And we went back, our consultants went back to their own data, tens of thousands of voters' input into that map drawing to say, do you want to take this alignment or take that alignment? But this was all citizen contributions to the map-making process that we were able to reorient.
One of the concerns I've heard is that if Texas is not playing nice, California needs to get in the ring. Otherwise, there's this double standard. Why should California not swing low? Where does that put Californians and their interests? We know that this is a blue state.
Well, we're a blue state with patches of red. One response to Chris is, again, I believe, and he just mentioned a couple of members of the House who have successfully appealed across political divides to win their seat in rural areas in California. Politicians shouldn't choose their voters. Voters should choose their politicians. I think what Chris was saying is, hey, trust us, we've drawn these maps even better. Oh yeah, we've suspended the independent commission, sorry. It's almost certain that all of these 5 Republicans who represent each 750,000 citizens in California, they're going to go away to be replaced by Democrats. That is a top-down approach. It's politicians telling citizens what they're going to get and what's right, as opposed to politicians putting forward better ideas in fair districts written by an independent commission, and winning those seats the old-fashioned way, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
I have two more questions I want to make sure we get to quickly. Something I think has gotten a bit lost in this conversation, not just here, but broadly, is if the Democrats do win back the House, besides creating headwinds for the Trump administration, what policy do you hope they'll enact that would behoove Californians?
There would be an accountability for a lot of the executive actions that were taken right now to make sure that we are at least shining a spotlight on those in formal hearing, and then also appropriating a budget. Look at where we're at right now during a federal shutdown, appropriating a budget that would help to advantage a lot of the programs that we have right now. You're going to have to argue with the Senate, which I can read the tea leaves just as well as anyone else, and I don't see the Democrats. I think it's much less likely that they take control of the Senate right now, so you're going to have a deadlocked Congress right now. It's tougher, but in my opinion, it is more advantageous for us to be able to fight and to have that platform to fight for interests that are specific to California or to all Americans right now, if you're thinking about healthcare, higher education, on down the line, rather than ceding all three branches, well, and the presidency in both houses, to one-party rule in Washington right now. It's the best step that we can take, and I would like to be able to see us at least play on a level playing field as we're approaching those midterm elections.
As evidenced at times by this conversation, we've seen this campaign get quite bitter. We have also seen it take on partisan hues. Has this deepened the divide in the state of California? And if so, is that worthwhile?
Well, I would just say, I think we're both passionate, but I will shake Chris's hand after this and hope to have him on my podcast, truth be told.
No,
I'm not kidding. We're going to do it. We'll do it. Because this is all about civil dialogue, and that's why we're here, and that's why this is so important. Listen, will this deepen the partisan divide? It's certainly stirring up a ton of passion. I believe the way this whole thing has been framed is Newsom v. Trump, which advantages both of them, really, if you think about it. Both can raise huge amounts of money on this. In campaigns, if you're not all campaign election law experts, when you raise money for one campaign, in many cases it's fungible, you can use it for another campaign. So one of the biggest contributors to the Yes On campaign was Governor Newsom's recall fund. He wrote a huge check from that to the Yes On 50. This is serving to raise huge amounts of money nationally, and I think distract us from what's happening right under our noses, which is that a short-term win, perceived win for Democrats in California is trading our long-term democratic soul. And I think California should be a leader and a beacon for what's right. Our mission should be to do what's right. Will this increase the partisan divide? Probably. I think if you think about the almost 3 million Republicans who will lose their representative just in California, how they're going to feel after this, and what they're going to be motivated to do when they take power, and the shoe is on the other foot, I think it's the wrong precedent, and I really do think it increases the divide. And again, with respect to Chris's arguments, there is no way that what Texas and California are doing are going to make a dent in what is highly, highly, highly likely to be, based on historical fact, a massive change in the House pro-Democrat. And what we will have done is increase partisanship, disenfranchise people in multiple states, and further fracture our democracy. And I think Californians are better than that.
I would argue this is way more corollary than causation, the outcome of this election, that deepening partisan divide, and I would also argue is often thrown at us by the actions of President Trump himself, and a lot of those around him is going to continue to come at us regardless of the outcome of this election and regardless if we had this election at all. So we have, and I agree, the way out of this is better civil dialogue, which, by the way, I've got great relationships with many of my Republican colleagues in the legislature right now. There are areas that we find agreement. We solve some pretty tricky policy questions, and sometimes we do so because of their votes to get us over a majority threshold with enough Democrats not being in support of housing policy or what have you. So there are other ways and other approaches that we will continue. I will continue to hold myself accountable to a lot of better practices and how we conduct ourselves as office holders. But I do think that the culture that's out there right now, and particularly the machines that are out there right now that love to use division tactics and partisan overtones to help that divide, do help to be able to fester some of the interests that are out there, including the president and those that surround him right now. And that will continue to be there after the election. I don't think this causes that.
Okay, we got really into the nitty-gritty in this conversation, so very quickly, one sentence. Please tell us, what are you asking voters to approve or reject in the next month?
I'm asking voters to vote yes on 50, the Election Rigging Response Act.
Why? You can have one more sentence.
Okay, one more sentence. I'm asking voters to consider voting yes because the outcome of this responds to actions that we are seeing in other states, and you have the opportunity, you uniquely have the opportunity as California voters to speak your voice and say, we need to be going toe-to-toe because this is going to affect power in Washington, which affects me.
Well, I'm asking everyone to vote no on Prop 50. And the reason I'm asking you to vote no is because gerrymandering, where politicians draw lines in secret and choose their voters, is wrong in Texas, it's wrong in California, and it's wrong anywhere in the country. California should take the high ground and be an example to the rest of the country. And the forces of history and math and the fact that the president's party is likely to lose a massive number of seats will add insult to injury when in the aftermath of a likely change in control of the House to the other side, we're left with millions and millions of disenfranchised people in California, our fellow citizens.
Excellent run-on sentences.
I tried to keep it short.
You both did well. I would have cut you off otherwise.
Just as a reminder, so many of you have already submitted questions, but go ahead and scan the QR code if you haven't already and submit your questions for this session. Now, to kick off our Q&A session, our first question today will be asked by Uma Onwuchekwa, an Aaron Price Fellow. Each year, the Aaron Price Fellows program selects 40 kind, inquisitive, open-minded ninth graders from a pool of 300 applicants for a 3-year journey. They go behind the scenes to see how cities function, explore the role of community members in shaping society, and develop empathy and skills for navigating a diverse world. The program is a high school leadership experience started in 1991 by the Price family. The mission of Aaron Price Fellows Program is to prepare a highly motivated and diverse group of San Diego public high school students to be responsible, engaged, and caring members of their community. Today, there are over 1,000 Aaron Price Fellows alumni, with 500 locally carrying out the mission of the program by making a difference in their families, careers, and communities.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Uma Onwuchekwa. I'm a sophomore attending Kearney High School in the School of Engineering, Innovation, and Design. My question is, what do you believe are key elements to successful nonpartisan redistricting that could broadly be applied to California voters and their representatives?
Can I start?
Take it away.
Great question. Great delivery, by the way, of that question.
Thank you.
A lot of poise. Listen, I'd encourage everyone to read the charter of the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission that we have in effect right now in California, and is still in effect, unless we vote yes on Prop 50 and we suspend the Independent Citizens Districting Commission. It has a charter. It's actually not that long. One of the key principles is it's chosen from Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. I believe it's about 14 people. They have a budget of $1 million a year. Anyone know what the budget of California is? Don't say it, Chris. $322 billion a year. $322 billion. And $1 million for this independent commission for them to meet regularly and adjudicate these maps. A couple of the principles are that there should be communities of interest. so that the people represented should actually have like interests. So for instance, if it's an agricultural community and those maps are driven accordingly, then their representative represents those interests and understands them. Another is that the map should be compact. When you look at them, they should be visually compact. When you look at the maps for Prop 50, they have these huge, one has an elephant trunk, one has a big long line coming down the coast. And the reason they're written that, they're written that way is when one party draws partisan maps, they have to divide up the opposition into little teeny amounts and then add them in with the majority so that their vote doesn't count when it comes to the time of an election. So those are some of the principles, and I'd encourage everyone to check out the charter.
So yes, the principles are there. They're also embedded with our San Diego County, San Diego City independent redistricting commissions as well. And so we definitely agree on the principles, but some nuance to understand as well. One, with respect to compactness, that is it can be subjective right now. There are equally as a number of other weirdly oriented maps in the current congressional map, which is fine, and that's what they adopted. I'll take one, for example, is represented by Congressmember Kevin Kiley, which starts up in the Rockland area, hits Lake Tahoe, and goes all the way down past Death Valley. I mean, it's huge. That dramatically shrinks right now to better capture a lot of communities on the I-80 Sacramento suburban area right now, making it more compact. So there's some movement of the maps, whether it's the current iteration or the future iteration. The commission's budget is an ongoing budget right now, although it drastically increases when they actually convene post-census right now, as they will do their work, and so they will have a much more budget to work with when the rubber meets the road during those couple of years. And again, this is nuanced, but it is actually something you have to underscore. The commission is not suspended. My maps aren't changing. The state Senate maps aren't changing. The BOE is not changing. The commission is still in existence. The voters have the question in front of them about whether or not they want the alternate maps to be in effect for the next 3 cycles. It does not suspend the commission.
Thank you so much. Okay. 43 questions, which is amazing. Thank you for participating. I'm going to start with some of the ones that have the most thumbs up, so it sounds like a lot of people are interested in hearing some of these answers. I like this one. This is a solutions Politifest. We don't necessarily fall under that umbrella. We're kind of the anomaly here, but if we agree gerrymandering is wrong, but if you're arguing California should take the high road and not participate, what is your alternate solution to hold the states that are participating accountable? I think, did I understand the premise of the question correctly with my paraphrasing? Okay, we're going to say yes.
A couple things. I think that when we passed our independent commission and altered our constitution in 2010, we earned the right to lecture other states about how they do their redistricting because we assume the moral high ground. Now that, and with due respect to Chris, we are suspending the maps that the independent commission drew if Prop 50 passes. We're suspending the maps that were impartially decided by the independent commission. We're putting in maps driven by the party in power to overtly eliminate 5 seats of their opposing party, right, in California. That's what we know will happen, and that's what was done. I said earlier, I think that the solution in any state is setting an example of putting forward better candidates with better policies to deliver results for their constituents. It's the way democracy works. It's the way our system is designed. And I believe that every state should have an independent commission. That's ultimately the solution. I believe that there are 10 that have an independent commission nationally that's akin to ours, and 4 to 5 more that have advisory commissions or other bodies that advise the legislators who write maps. We should have more independent commissions. But when we suspend the work of our independent commission and use the maps drawn by one set of politicians to eliminate their competition, we lose all moral high ground to lecture anyone else in the country but what they should do, which is why I find it very ironic that the ballot measure that you have in your mailbox or in your hand says we support independent redistricting commissions nationwide while we suspend our maps for multiple election cycles.
And that would be the solution, is to have Congress not just finally pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which they always fail to do and is not happening right now, but also take a serious look at passing legislation that somehow requires and helps states through funding national redistricting, independent redistricting measures right now, maybe conditioning some of that. I'm not hopeful that I would see that with Republicans in control of either or certainly both the executive and the legislative branches in Washington. But let's hope that maybe, I don't know, this national blow up that we're all living through right now might incentivize some cooler heads to come together and find agreement on this question and at least drop a bill and get a conversation in motion.
One thought on that. So I had a chance to meet a guy named Senator Michael Bennet the other day, and Senator Bennet is from Colorado. He's a 3-term senator, moderate Democrat. He's running for a governor in Colorado. He actually put forward legislation in Congress to do just this years ago, to create a law that was national that independent commissions had to draw the maps in all the 50 states. Now, you can imagine where that went, nowhere. Because politicians who dominate their home state, they don't want an independent commission. By the way, do you all know who were the biggest opponents in 2010 to the Independent Citizens Commission? No. The party in power in California at the time that had most control, Democrats. Democrats spent $7 million opposing Proposition 20, which created the Independent Citizens Commission. They didn't want it to exist because they wanted to continue to draw the maps in secret. I'm saying let's not go back to that time.
I do want to ask another solutions question very quickly. What other recourse do Democrats have in this state to push back against the Trump administration that might not involve asking voters to walk back something that they already approved?
It's what we have been doing in a very unprecedented year in Sacramento since January. We have been suing where we need to, where we see an opportunity through the Attorney General, and actually through several Attorneys General across other states as well, to be able to demonstrate a violation of law that would hopefully rule on unlawful and unconstitutional certain decisions. And these usually come around issues of major funding for things that we care about here in California. So there's the courts action. You know, we have been having a variety, a renewed interest in conversations that really stress a lot of values-driven policies that are important to California's debates that we've had happen. They may have been signed into law, and those questions are now being revisited in a new year, a new context, a new political climate. Most of those have been upheld, or some other bills that are trying to undo past actions have died early in many of those committees. But I am seeing a resurgence of a lot of that activity right now. So I think that, you know, we are trying to make sure that we are holding up the wall the best that we can, right? That we are in a limited and a more constrained state budget compared to the federal government, looking at areas of funding that we could possibly supplement so local systems don't completely fail, and we could at least help to bridge their needs right now if the federal government does withhold support. These aren't, far from ideal, they're not good solutions or places to be, but they're what we have to work with right now.
Do you believe Republicans will not gerrymander in other states if California sets the right example by voting this down, or was this bell already rung by Texas?
That is a great question. I think it's safe to say that now that the horse is out of the barn, that both Democratic-dominated states and Republican-dominated states will attempt to gerrymander. I think
which
that
is not new. We should point out.
It's not new, but it's a very new mid-decade,
yeah.
right? Because our historical precedent, which is the way it should be, is that we look at redistricting when we have census data, right? Every 10 years, this is in our Constitution. We understand how many people are in each state, in each part of each state, and we redistrict and we reapportion House seats. So I think the horse is out of the barn. I think that this is likely to happen in many states, but one thing I like that Chris said is we are a country of laws. What separates the United States and our constitutional democracy over the 240 plus years we've been in existence is that we've established a rule of law and that can be pressed and challenged and strained, but we have a rule of law, we have to keep it. And so plaintiffs that want to bring actions against something like is happening in Texas with the NAACP action to reject those maps, those are within our system, and that is the way America works and should work. But I'm afraid that this is happening across the country, and I'm not sure where it's going to lead.
This question has the most likes right now, which shows that we are really in a room of political nerds. Who are the people and groups funding the pro and anti-Prop 50 campaigns? If you could each maybe give us one or two groups on your side, and I can help round that out if need be.
I actually probably haven't, you might know better than I admit I haven't been tracking it as closely. I know that on the no side, Charles Munger, who was actually the original major funder for the Citizens Redistricting Commission, has probably been the biggest donor on that side.
Over 30 million in a month from him.
And why don't you remind me
Well,
of the yes side?
on the yes on 50, well, Governor Newsom, from his recall fund, wrote the initial biggest check. And then there were a number of billionaires who've been supporters of Newsom, like Reed Hastings, who founded Netflix. Michael Moritz is a venture capitalist. These guys have put in millions. And then there have been a lot of small dollar contributions that have been written in from citizens, probably all across the country. Because again, unfortunately what happens with these issues is they become huge fundraisers for alternative political agendas. Right? So keep in mind that any money raised for either of these funds, no on 50 or yes on 50, those funds stay there, and any funds that are not used are used to support some other cause or some other politician next for their agenda.
Many of the labor unions statewide have also supported the pro campaign. I would highly recommend, if you're curious in that, which it seems like many of you are, to go look that up. That information is readily available from legitimate, reliable sources, and I think that is a worthwhile way to spend a couple minutes of your day. I'm sure you would both agree. What happens if this fails from each of your perspectives?
I mean, it's actually a very simple answer. If it fails, the current maps stay in place. The midterm elections for California go forward as they're currently drawn. We could get into a whole bunch of, philosophizing or prognosticating about, what does this mean? But I come back to those sort of political consequences are going to be there regardless of this passing or not passing.
That is the messaging fueling your campaign, though, right? That this is a repudiation of the Trump administration.
Correct. No, I'm saying we will still have future challenges, right? It's about the balance. It's about leveling the playing field for the outcome of the balance of power in the House.
What happens if this fails?
Well, I hope it fails, and I think that within California, when and if it fails, we have maps driven by an independent body chartered by our Constitution, and we have a citizenry that is still fairly represented by Democrat and Republican representatives in the House. And the integrity of that continues. California's example to the nation of doing this in a fair and free way continues. And what happens outside of California in Washington, D.C., it's anyone's guess. I cited all of the data, historical data of all of these midterms. The House of Representatives is almost certain to change hands to Democrats, regardless of Prop 50.
I'm going to ask you a question that you both might despise. What's one thing you learned from the opposition today? It doesn't mean it swayed your position, just something you're taking away that you're going to ruminate on.
Did you learn anything, Chris? Or?
I learned that you're a decent fella, but I didn't know you before this, and so that's I can't say I learned that. No, I mean, this is something that on some level, right, is just a very simple and very direct question, right? It gets into a lot of sort of subtext and other questions as well that I've been thinking about pretty critically since the summer when this all began. So I regret nothing is coming to mind right now that certainly hasn't changed my mind, but it's a different way to look at something because I've been trying. When I voted to put this to the ballot. I think I'm the only one so far that has actually voted on this, to be able to put this question to voters right now. I started at a position of no, because I did not want to be able to, for a lot of the same reasons I think that you were arguing about how this sends a message nationwide. But when I realized that this has such consequence that affects communities I represent, people I care about here in California, and that maps were drawn in adherence to some of the very same criteria that the commission is adhered to, I was able to understand that this was the rational choice, was to vote yes.
I appreciate that, Chris. Well, I don't think either of our minds has changed. We've not changed each other's minds. I don't know if we've changed any of your minds. I've enjoyed getting to know you as well through being on stage with you, and we'll continue this conversation. I think this has been a great civil dialogue, which I really appreciate. I probably picked up some subtleties around the way that your views on the way maps are drawn, some of the pros and cons of map drawing, and that was interesting. But I hope this has been useful to everyone else.
Thank you both so much. I think I learned that we can still have civil discourse. It's always good to be reminded of that. Thank you all for paying attention and for being here and staying awake all day through all of these really important sessions. And no matter what, I don't think anything will be as controversial as parking at Balboa Park, so we can at least sleep easy knowing that. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Joey. As a reminder, this wasn't like our other presentations, but feel free to vote for, whatever debate or issue you thought was correct here.
And that's your practice vote, and then actually go vote on this.
Yeah, practice.
Sometime between Monday
We're
and
gonna get
November 4th.
preliminary results here at Voice
Yeah,
of
this
San
can be a
Diego.
litmus test.
Thank you for joining us. The next session starts in this room at 4:15. That's a live recording of the Voice of San Diego podcast, the most popular public affairs podcast recorded in Greater Little Italy, San Diego. And we will announce the winners, so stay tuned for that. Help us spread the word by sharing our website, voiceofsandiego.org, and I hope you've had a lot of fun today. Thank you.